Hello friends, welcome to my lair. I'm Professor Bell, and today we're going to build the iconic Viking Longship. So before I did anything else, I gave the kit a good spritz with primer. I probably should have just done it after construction, but the plastic in this kit really doesn't like to accept paint, like without primer it will beat up and flake off, so I just gave it an initial coat right away. The hull halves were attached with big ol' connections, so there was lots of trimming. I paid special attention to the figurehead since it's bound to draw attention to itself, and it's pretty darn cool. At first I was going to secure the halves together with just clothespins, but as you can see, this kit requires something a little firmer. So I brought out the binder clips. As a carpenter, you can never have too many clamps, and as a model builder, you can never have too many binder clips. Seriously though, binder clips and clothespins are some of the items I use most. Now I'm using Testors, not Tamiya here, because Testors has the Mondo applicator brush, and I really wanted to saturate the seams with extra thin. So I'm going to let you all in on a little secret. This isn't the first time I've built this kit. I did another one like 4 years ago, and I really liked how it came out. I bought a crew set to go with it, I got some barrels and bags to go with it, and I scratch built some other details too. Then I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I set it in resin so it looked like it was skimming the waves? And I can even replicate phosphorescence and make it look super sweet. So I poured some resin into a mold around it, and I didn't use low temp or deep pour or whatever kind of epoxy you're supposed to use, and so my oars all got ruined, and everything else was encased in epoxy. I had some ideas to fix it, but in the end I just decided to build a new one and share it all with you. However, there's plenty on that old piece of garbage that can still be salvaged, so here we go. By the way, I'm going to try out a bunch of nifty little techniques to make this kit shine in this video, so if you like what you're seeing so far, feel free to press the like button. And if you want to subscribe so you can get in on all my stuff, well, I'd sure appreciate that too. There we are, picked clean. So the deck is kind of weird. You have to put the various sections all in a kind of an odd order. It isn't just front to back, but they all also sort of lock together, so all's well that ends well. Just be careful if you have trouble following directions like me. See, I forgot to put this doohickey in. It's barely visible, but I know the Vikings would miss it since it's pretty necessary to steep the mast. Again, all's well that ends well. Just so you know, there's 30 oars in 2 different lengths. They're all attached to the sprue at 2 points, and you'll need to clean and remove a seam line from each one. It's tedious, but here we are. I gave the whole thing a coat of Tamiya's wood deck brown. It's a good base for the wood effect I'm going to do. If you've watched my videos where I paint the wood propellers on World War I airplanes, it's the same technique, only this is a lot of propellers worth of area to cover. So here come the oil paints. I'm using a mix of burnt sienna, raw sienna, burnt umber, yellow ochre, and black. Now, your art teacher may tell you don't ever use black, it will turn your painting muddy. Technically, that's right, but the Vikings applied liberal amounts of tar to their longships, and so they would have been rather tarry looking. Of course, if you've never seen tar, it's a nice oozy black. I think the result is actually surprisingly pleasant and accurate. I'm also varying the colors for each plank a little bit. To be honest, wood grain effect isn't technically very accurate for the scale, but it does make a nice visual effect. And if something is wood, your eyes want to see wood grain. So I like to do it. I think if you just painted the whole thing brown, it'd look just fine anyway. Here's what I'm using to paint the figurehead. Maybe it's a little Christmassy, but I like the red and green combo, and let's be serious. If the Jarl has enough booty to build a longship, then he should have enough to gild parts of the figurehead. Again, I'm painting the individual planks to give some visual interest. I'm also adding a lot more black to the hull planks, since these would have had the most contact with seawater, ergo they would have had the most tar. It only makes sense. So the big problem with this technique is that oil paints take forever and a day to dry. I painted this half, then waited 5 weeks before doing the next section, which may have been excessive, but we had a very cold and wet spring in Nevada, so I didn't want to risk smudging it. And while I was waiting, I got to thinking. If I were a longship owning Jarl, I don't think I'd be too happy with this plain old stern post. Vikings love spirals, wavy lines, intricate patterns, and all sorts of goofy stuff. So I want to see if I can upgrade this stern post with a nice little snail spiral. Luckily, there's plenty of sprue to experiment with. And I don't really like how this first one turned out. Let's see if we can make a better one. By the way, I finally found a good use for my wife's scented candles. Oddly enough, the smell of burnt plastic actually improves the aroma on this one. There we go. That looks more like it could fit over Princess Leia's ear. Funny story. Actually, when I was a boy, my father convinced me that Princess Leia's hair was actually donuts, and it was common for royalty to wear food items in their hair in case they got hungry during court. I knew about fruit in some ladies' hats, so it didn't sound so far-fetched to 8-year-old me. Anyway, nobody had better try eating my stern snail, or they'll have Snorri Hackanson to deal with. That's what I named my Jarl. I'm getting more and more invested in this fantasy as the build progresses. Now, for my stern snail, I want to use a nice goop of glue so the two parts can melt together nicely. I'm sorry if I'm spending too much time on this, but I think it's actually my favorite part, and I hope it encourages you to goof around a little bit if you think you can improve a kit. Take a chance. Even if you ruin everything, at least you'll learn a lesson that you never would have known had you never tried. Plus, the spiral thing is accurate to the Oseberg ship, or at least it had a couple of spiral things too, so why the heck not? I mostly wanted to show you this tube of oil paint because a little goes a long way. Seriously, I've been using that tube for 15 years, and it is still going strong. Did I mention there's 30 oars? And just remember that between each section of oil paint, I waited a few weeks before moving on. This kit would sit under a paper towel to protect it from dust for weeks, just so I wouldn't accidentally put a fingerprint on it. So I got fed up waiting weeks for the oils. I decided to see if I could get a similar effect with artist's acrylics. You get the wood grain effect from the brush strokes, and model acrylics are fairly good at hiding that, but artist acrylics are a different beast. So I bought these two value packs for basically 3 shades of brown. Oh well, I guess I'll paint something sometime. So I basically do the same thing I did with the oil paints, only I try to hurry it up because acrylics will dry in a matter of minutes or less rather than weeks. And the result isn't actually that bad. I think the oils give a better texture, smoother perhaps, but the acrylics work fairly well. I'll have to give it a shot on my next propeller and see what happens. By the way, there's 30 oars, so just imagine me doing this 29 more times. If you were wondering what the 53 on the tongue depressor is, it's the part number. The oars come in 2 lengths, and I was trying to keep track of them. It actually worked out. Sometimes I like to annotate the directions just so I'm clear. Even then I screw things up sometimes. And I also decided to cannibalize this one last part. Also, the stand doesn't fit the keel anymore. I think it makes sense since I gave it a primer, a coat of acrylic, and a bunch of oil paint. Anyway, it's nothing a hobby knife can't fix. So I actually scratch built this little pile of bags, and I thought you might want to see how I did it. It's basically just tester's putty squirted in a line as thick as you want your sacks to be. Then let it dry just a little bit and press into it with the back of your hobby knife so it forms bag shapes, not the blade, the back. Then, once it's all the way dry, just pop the bags off the foil and give them a paint and a wash. Note that the sticker doesn't fit on the nameplate, especially when you do it upside down. These little things are cleats for the rigging. They're definitely necessary if you build this with the sail up, and I think they add some nice little detail even with the sail down. They are kind of a pain in the neck though. By the way, I opted to build this with the sail stowed away. I think it's interesting that on a real longship, the most expensive thing would have been the sail. Seriously, think about the amount of wool that would have been tightly woven and sewn together to make that thing. What's funny is that the sail on this kit is the cheapest looking thing I've ever seen. I guess it's okay for a vacuform sail, but I just couldn't bring myself to use it, so I furled some muslin instead. Now I get to attach my salvaged crew. They came in a separate set that was also made by Emhar. They're okay, but it is tedious painting them all. They're also sort of positionable, but it's hard to move their arms, and they'll give you some trouble. If you get the crew kit, just stick with it. I think it's actually worth it. To be honest, these guys are actually worse than the oars. And I made sure to place my doodads around the deck before I put the mast sail and spars in their holders. I guess one other reason I chose to go sail down is that these were predominantly human-powered vessels. The sails were necessary for long voyages, but the oars were necessary for everything else. Now, just a few last little touch-ups. And with that, she's done. So, I really like this little model. I mean, I liked it enough to do it all over again to fix my stupid mistakes. I also probably spent way more time on this than was necessary because of those oils. I think one could finish this model in a day pretty darn easily. Seriously, if you just buy the kit without the crew and all the other doodads and things like that and then paint it brown, it's still going to look really, really cool. And if you add the crew and do some other little details, it's really going to shine. I think it's a cool one. Now, with all of that said, I have a confession for all of you. So, I don't really like Vikings. I mean, I like fake modern Vikings because fake modern Vikings are basically like Macho Man Randy Travis going,
I'm a Viking, and I'm gonna raid your town and take all your stuff and ravage your wife, and she's gonna like it. Why? Because I'm a Viking.
But that's not real Vikings. Real Vikings didn't listen to Valhalla Calling. They didn't look like they just got done warming up the stage at CBGB's for the Sex Pistols. And I know for a fact that real Vikings didn't do their shopping at Hot Topic. I mean, real Vikings were mostly farmers who did seasonal raiding or trading trips, sometimes both at the same time. Real Vikings' weapons and armor was actually markedly inferior to their European counterparts. Viking technology wasn't anything to write home about. In fact, it was worse than the rest of Europe's was. I mean, honestly, the reality is they were predators. And like most predators, they were in essence cowards. They went after the weakest possible, most defenseless communities in the rest of Europe. The one thing they had going for them was the Viking Longship. That's it. And it was this one piece of technology that allowed them to be dynamic and to terrify the rest of Europe for a couple of centuries. But the rest of Europe advanced past the Viking scourge. And ultimately, the Vikings couldn't beat the rest of Europe, so they had to join them. Finally, if you've made it this far and you've not subscribed, come on, man.